going to do is a very, very abridged version of this book that we put together called Waiting for Charlie Brown, and just a few quick things about it, and then we're going to just read straight through this thing. Charlie Brown is a metaphor for death, which you may not guess from hearing what you hear tonight. It's about these two guys who are a couple of good old boy rednecks from this area, and like small-time criminals who live out in the country. And it's sort of like the place where the rough South crosses with Roberto Bolaño. And the first poem is just an introductory poem. And it's the only really subjective comment that we make in the book about the characters. Last poem's 34. Is the moral of every tragedy, murder, slaughter, battle, absurdity, we are animals. Yet this truth is a heresy, a weakness, and a noble admission, a spiritual fracture in the ridgeline of our architecture, because we cannot possibly be what we are.
At the viewing, waiting for Uncle Barton's body suddenly to sputter and lurch to life the way his old tractor did each spring. I know he is watching me when I turn on the tool shed's bare bulb, swinging by the ancient cord that disappears up into the dark rafters of that cathedral of bent nails, rust, and kerosene. He is whispering in the bottomland. It is not just the wind in the pines, but him. Sometimes I hear him walking in the cornfield, just a few rows in. Though I've never parted the stalks to look, I am wholly sure that it is him. Uncle Barton had found a lot of artifacts on his land, especially near the river. Old Catawba pottery sherds and arrowheads. When we were children, Uncle Barton would walk in the woods with my brother and me. He would tell us that he could hear the Indians singing in the woods near the river, that it wasn't just the water and the rocks, but voices. That he was wholly sure it was the singing of the first people to live there. Maybe a week before he died, I was out at the farm and Uncle Barton brought up the voices. He asked me if I remembered him telling me about those Indians singing. Sure I did. My brother did too. Well, said Uncle Barton, they're still there, but if they build that goddamn highway, won't nobody ever hear them ever again. The old place had been renovated, rewired, but the ghost was still there. In the timbers, his voice a loose piece of tin conversing with the westerly wind. I put the key in the tractor's ignition, but it is his hand turns it. Reaching into the Oliver's old toolbox, it is his arm reaches in too, helping me search out a block of wood, a length of chain. It was a good thing Uncle Barton had died a year ago happy. Instead of seeing the bottomland dissected by the bypass, the stream choked with debris, its special power silenced by an oily film, the soccer fields replacing tobacco, the chemicals green the turf, run off into the groundwater so they still get cancer, those kids. Their parents doing all that driving. Used to be a night like this was filled with croakers and lightning bugs. Now it's nothing but brake lights and car horns. If man had been meant to drive, God would have made him with his middle finger eternally extended. It was a good thing Uncle Barton had died a year ago happy. Train engineers don't even blow their own whistles anymore. Sure, it's safer, the computer never forgets. Maybe all that safety will give us space to spin yarns like vibrant, transcendent spiders, orbs of energy. Or maybe we will just atrophy in a casing that lacked sweet sap, nourishment. The power company murdered the mammoth oak in the pasture, paved it over. I sold the last of the cows and became wholly convinced Uncle Barton had died happy a year ago.
Sam and Larry sat on the creek bank, fishing poles cradled between their legs, hooks dropped expertly into the last pool before the creek dumps its crawdads and catfish into the muddy Henry Fork. Their daddy maintained a vague interest from his beer cooler seat. Just remember, boys, that water is all there really is. Creeks creating bulging rivers, rivers hijacked into sailboat lakes. Try doing without it for a while, and you'll see, he said, turning a long neck bud up, then whistling a quirky little tune into the bottle's mouth. Sam and Larry were focused on the bobbing floats. the delightful syrupy taste of the rare cokes that Daddy had brought for this afternoon when he had taken them out of school for a little fishing. They already knew before the sun sank over the old man Goodman's willows that they may have to throw him in the bed of the pickup, and already, inside their fisherman's silence that they struggled to maintain, an argument was growing over who would get to drive. They sat in the Baptist church parking lot, making their plan. Sam would grab an armload of records and dash from the curb market where the aisle opened straight to the door in Larry's waiting Scirocco. Sam flipped through the albums. He wanted all the Kiss and the Skinner, and if he could manage to move them to the P's, he'd grab that Poco that had rows of Cimarron. Outside, Larry was waiting for cops, thinking they shouldn't have smoked that last joint at the church. When Sam came hoofing out the door, the bell jangling as he leapt through the door toward the car, his arms stacked with a whole hack of records, the market clerk in pursuit, his red apron flapping as Larry shoved the car door open and Sam stumbled, fell headfirst into the seat. When Larry popped the clutch, the car door swung wide open, catching the clerk in his knee, his face, and arm. They barked rubber till they left Highland and headed south toward their Hog Hill trailer. Excited, they examined their booty, some Skinner, the Poco, a band called Steely Dan, one Kiss, and 10 copies of KC and the fucking Sunshine Band.
I saw one of them again today. I was just getting in the car at Lowe's. Here he comes. Shoulder-length hair, slicked back, skin tanned like leather, olive green muscle shirt and camouflage pants. Leather brogans. I'm glad I'm getting in the car already. He doesn't have time to approach me and make it look nonchalant. And there's no other way he will approach me. He wants to make it as normal as talking about the weather or asking the time when he asked me for $10 or ride across town to a non-existent job interview. I go home and measure the room to be sure of the square footage. I drive back to Lowe's Hardware. There he is again, walking along the bypass. There is a red light. As he's legging it across the intersection, a knife clatters onto the pavement. He has to turn around and pick it up. It is long and black, a dagger, maybe military surplus. I can't believe I don't see where it falls from or where he puts it. A woman with white hair looks out of the windshield of her golden Lexus in horror at the young man picking up the dagger. Then I'm through the intersection.
Sam entered the drugstore at 9 o'clock. The fluorescent lights flickered as he passed by some sunglasses that he wanted. But he marched on by toward the pharmacy, hand on the 38 in his pocket. "Give me all the Vicodin," he snarled, pointing the gun at the Weasley pharmacist. "Make it fast, motherfucker." The pharmacist grabbed a quart-sized plastic bottle from the back shelf and slid it over the counter. The pharmacist thought stocky Sam resembled a hog, a baseball catcher, grandfather's Black Angus bull. All these images ran through his mind as he trained a new pistol he'd never fired at the future farmer's patch on the back of Sam's jean jacket. Sam slumped to the floor where the herbal medicines gave way to contact lens solutions, still clutching the Vicodin. A fullback tackled from behind, the pharmacist would tell his tennis partner later.
I drive out to the Ingles for beer and gas and fresh mushrooms for spaghetti. On the way back home, I see him for the third and what I hope is the last time, walking past a closed furniture factory where Carbon City Road becomes Highway 70, probably going to ask someone at the KFC or Taco Bell parking lot for $10, or for a ride to a place so he can get them something they want him to have or something he promises to get them. I sit here hoping he's passing through, on his way to another town where his brother really did find work. I hope that he is on his way there, and that it is far away, and that when he gets there, he and his brother stay there. And then I begin to wonder who they will hurt in that place, how long it will take them to get fired or quit or get arrested. Then I start to get paranoid. I begin to worry that it is here, that he isn't passing through, that he and his brother are meeting here. And then when they meet up, he will say to his brother, "I saw him today. I saw him just as he was getting in his car. There were so many people. If I had come along 15 seconds sooner," and his brother will pull out a dagger just like the one his brother dropped in the intersection, and he'll stick it in a wall or in a floor or in a table because he always wanted to be a tough, like the tough guys in the movie. And he'll say, "No worries, we got all the time in the world." I worry I worry I will look up and see them outside my window in the middle of the night, or standing beside my car when I come out of a bar half lit and alone. I worry that I will turn around and they will be staring me in the face.
The English teacher raised her face to the fluorescent light, her left hand clutched at her heart, the right one bending the book. This was her poetry trance. Gauging their friends' reactions, the class stirred uneasily. Larry stared at her stocking legs, praying quietly for her to sit the edge of the desk, to ride her skirt up those stunning thighs as she rocked to the rhythm of the village smithy or the stopping by the woods poem. He thought of carrying her over his shoulder, one hand on the black panties he'd once glimpsed, bare feet beating his belly. This was his poetry trance.
A month goes by, nothing. Then one morning I'm jogging up Union, taking a shortcut to the Greenway. It's barely light. The town is about as quiet as it ever gets. Maybe there's even a mist hanging around in the branches of the trees. I'm concentrating on my breathing. In a way, I'm not seeing anything, just what I need to see to keep from getting run over. But I see him. He waves. At first I think he's waving at me, but it's impossible. He isn't even facing my direction. He's standing in the parking lot of the Exxon and waving to someone on the opposite corner. I look to the spot he's waving at. His brother is there. I dart behind a tree in someone's yard. Holy fuck, do they see me? Do they see me? Of course, they're waiting for me. Holy shit, they're pretending they weren't expecting me. There was one more cross street between me and the Exxon. I was going to have to get close, but I felt that if I crossed the street now or turned back, for certain they'd see me. Besides, I needed to be sure. I turned off Union. Heart pounding hard, afraid to jog home, afraid not to jog home. I went home by curious stretches of road. A week went by and then I started jogging at a park where lots of people were and at peak times of activity. I was afraid to run alone along the river or up at the mountain or even around town. Besides losing these freedoms, there were all sorts of tragic shenanigans around the house. Waking up and walking around in the middle of the night, carefully looking out of each and every window, checking the locks 2 and 3 times. I cracked a toe creeping around the kitchen with a baseball bat in the dark. In the back of my mind, I knew I had really gone mad when I installed motion sensor lights in the backyard and the driveway. Had I known that they had actually walked right up to my house or driven by in the middle of the night when I was asleep or writing or both, I really would have come unhinged. There was no one to turn to, not my friends and not the police. Neither would have believed me. The police would have asked too many questions, questions I couldn't answer. Because I knew I'd had the brothers do one too many things for me. One too many.
Larry was never crazy about snakes, but wasn't scared when he saw one hanging in the barn or slinking through the equipment shed. Grandpa said they eat the rats, got their place. Sam would carry one in his pocket to school. He liked the dry scaly coiling around his forearm, the dead slit eyes, but mostly what he liked was how other people feared them mindlessly. Grasping a snake, he felt a power he had no words for, better than sex, intoxicating as dope, and he knew the devil would tell him what to do if he only waited. Yes, he would.
I bought a treadmill so I wouldn't have to run outside anymore. I would have ordered every meal in, but I began to fear that one of them would show up with a pizza or some Chinese, a rope and a knife and a naked hatred. I started playing my radio lower so I could listen for menacing sounds, creeping, lurking. I kept my Swiss Army knife in my pocket. I admit I carried a baseball bat from room to room. Wherever I was in the house, there was the ash bat from high school leaning against the wall. I fed my fear. I fueled it with copious amounts of alcohol and painkillers and pot after pot of black coffee. I bought litter boxes and kept the cats inside in spite of the stench. I grew a beard. I wore sunglasses. I got a bigger knife. I quit going out to the store at all, and I used drive-throughs for all of my meals. It goes without saying there was no more swimming in the city's indoor pool. There was no more photographing wildlife off the beaten path. I stayed in and watched movies on Film Fix. Ronnie Sapp, God bless him, bought me some pot. and he brought it over to cheer me up. I watched 2010 A Space Odyssey for the umpteenth time, and then I did the same with 2001. I contrast and compare the character of Dr. Haywood Floyd in both movies for hours on end, how different he is. I love Kubrick's movie, but I like the Dr. Haywood Floyd of 2010 much better than the impersonal bureaucrat he appears to be in 2001. Roy Scheider does a great job in the role of Haywood Floyd. He did a good job being the sheriff of that town and all. Hell, what town expects their sheriff to have to fight a great white shark? I mean, the guy's marriage was breaking up, and I'm sure he had paperwork piling up, and it's like, okay, I gotta go out in a boat and kill a giant shark.
When Larry looked through the screen, he knew it was them. Scrawny, prematurely stooped, grinning like possums, balding, standing on apple boxes before the young hipster audience, sprawled like attitudes on their chairs and sofas. Pope and Peeler, reading their Charlie Brown poems. Pope, all artistic pauses. Peeler, spastic and cross-eyed. Larry almost felt sorry for them, almost resheathed the black dagger, almost stepped back out of the porch light into the anonymous darkness, almost waved Sam back behind the naked pin oaks, but he knew it was the only way. So as Pope read about the crucified cat, Sam swung the gleaming barrel of the 12 gauge in the Shaw Gray's West Asheville living room.
The poetry reading is survived by the poet, the poet's family, the poet's friends, many of whom are also poets, poets who aren't friends of the poet but who go to poetry readings with the unspoken expectation that the favor be returned. Young poets who pretend, even to themselves, that they saw something inspiring so they don't have to face what a waste the evening was. One of the poets in attendance claimed that the poetry reading could have been saved if they'd moved at full speed ahead to the lobby of a tire store. The poet took a seashell from inside his coat and placed it next to his ear. He spread his fingers and stuck his thumb on the side of his head so that it looked like antlers or antennae. He stood like that for a moment, and then he took his hand down. He put the shell away. Continued to explain. People are tired of having their poetry interrupted by cappuccino machines. People want poetry that is interrupted by pneumatic drills. They want compression and rattling of chains. People waiting in tire store lobbies want poetry, even if it allows them the chance to tell people how much they hate it. Even if it allows them to act embarrassed for the poet, or become angry at the poet, and walk out, or throw you out, but they want it. If we had only taken the poetry reading immediately to a tire store, the people in the lobby would have saved it. We wanted to save the poetry reading ourselves, but we were just a bunch of poets. And the best we could do was sit with it, hold its hand, and watch it breathe its last. Okay? Said the poet.
Thanks.
Okay, let's just take a quick break to refresh drinks again. And I know that Tim Peeler has brought some of his books along, which he'll be glad to sell and sign. And I don't know if Ted's brought anything with him or not.
I've got the last of some audio CDs that I need to sell for once.
All right.
Yeah. The last of their kind. They got handmade covers. I made them out of some hands I chopped off